What's the worst anime arc of all time? Is it the Black Star Dragon Ball arc of GT, the Fourth Ninja War from Naruto, or Endless 8? You know, most of the second season of Haruhi Suzumiya. Yeah, it's that one. I mean, you don't talk about that show anymore because that just killed all enthusiasm for it. But still, what is the other worst arc of all anime? For my money, the first arc I saw, where I felt just the sauce ooze out of what I was watching in real time, was the final arc of the classic shonen anime, Yu Yu Hakusho. If not for that final arc, I'd say Yu Yu Hakusho is one of the greatest shonen anime of the 90s. Something that captures that vibe of the era so damn well. That analog Lost Generation aimlessness, post-Dragon Ball action, all with a cynical fascination of the supernatural and horror. Something exquisitely post-Alien in so many ways. And most people are with the show for its first 3/4. After that, though, something happens. Yu Yu Hakusho is casually divided into 4 arcs, though as with most shows, it's more complicated than that. The Spirit Detective arc, the Dark Tournament arc, the Chapter Black arc, and the Three Kings arc. And it's this last arc, as well as its bridge at the end of Chapter Black, where the sauce evaporates from the series, where something is lost that's crucial. But in order to understand why the show lost steam, you have to understand where it got the steam. Why Toshihiro Togashi's masterful manga worked until it didn't. And we start with the Spirit Detective arc. However, before we get started talking about disappointing anime, I want to take a moment to talk about something very important. Specifically, how raw my face feels after shaving with a cheap, store-bought razor. Most people just choose what's on the shelf. You know, whatever you find at the supermarket or the grocery store or hell, your 7-Eleven for that matter. It doesn't matter if your face feels irritated afterwards. You just kind of accept it. It's a necessity. You'd rather upgrade your computer's RAM than your razor, but I get it. But you don't need to suffer through another painful shaving anymore. Thanks to today's sponsor, Henson Shaving. Henson Shaving is a Canadian brand that produces safety razors with aerospace precision. Sounds fancy? Well, don't worry. The average drugstore razor traps hair, increases surface friction, and encourages you to push that blade against your skin a little too much, thus damaging it. But Henson razors are cut from solid aluminum, with the blade exposed approximately 1/1000th of an inch. This level of control means fewer ingrown hairs, less irritation, and no need to press or irritate your skin. The result? A 4-time reduction of redness and irritation compared to your generic blades. This isn't a luxury brand, it's a permanent break from generic, disposable razors. If you use my code Anthony at checkout, you'll get 2 years worth of blades absolutely free. That's 100 potential blades free. Just make sure you have the appropriate products in your cart when ordering. Use the link in the description below or the QR code on screen for more. That's again code Anthony at checkout. And now, back to your regularly scheduled fighting.
Up next, enter the spirit world with an all-new episode of Yu Yu Hakusho.
The Spirit Detective arc is a loose term that really covers a large swath of different stories, all told in roughly the same order. Teenage delinquent Yusuke Urameshi dies unexpectedly when he saves a kid from an oncoming vehicle. However, his death wasn't simply unexpected for the people in his life, which includes his delinquent rival and most fun character to imitate at parties, Kuwabara, as well as his childhood friend and love interest, Keiko. No, Yusuke's death was also unexpected for the afterlife, who never anticipated Yusuke to ever sacrifice himself for anyone else, or really do anything unselfishly. Also, the kid he saved would have been fine if he didn't do anything at all, so it's completely pointless. But that's less important. The irony of situations is something that's crucial to Yu Yu Hakusho, but not relevant here necessarily. This establishes a few key things about the series right away. For one, Yusuke is a character who acts in unexpected and unorthodox ways. While he is a punk and a good street fighter, he will impulsively do the right thing when push comes to shove. But for another, and arguably more important to our intentions, this moment illustrates that the afterlife isn't infallible. It's a bureaucracy with paperwork that's painfully ill-equipped to handle any crisis that defies expectations. Despite categorizing and micromanaging everything, they're really ill-equipped. Though we know there's a King Enma, The man seemingly in charge is Enma, who's not a man at all, but rather an eternal baby who serves as Yusuke's boss for the series. There's also Botan, who, maybe second to Discworld's death, is my personal favorite Grim Reaper character. She's just very cheerful and happy, and can also hold her own in a minor fight, and I kinda love that. I think Death should be a more cheerful character. Anyway, most people dismiss the first Resurrection storyline of the anime, especially because the anime itself condenses it from the manga, because the manga goes on for a bit longer. While this takes place over the first 4 episodes of the anime, it's actually 18 chapters in the manga. There are multiple small adventures Yusuke goes on, and I can't help but feel this is the kind of story that Togashi wanted to tell early on. Stories about Yusuke as a ghost doing good deeds, almost kind of like a Great Teacher Onizuka kind of thing, or Assassination Classroom, but then shifted to Battle Shonen after a certain point of time. And while the Battle Shonen's great, I can't help but think of what could have been. And I think this will come back later, but we'll get to that later. Of course, Yusuke returns to life and is tasked with being a spirit detective, though amusingly, he does very little detective work as a spirit detective, and more just punches demons really hard in the face who try to mess around with the human world. So not much of a detective, more like a cop, really. And this arc is itself broken down further into 4 smaller arcs: the Artifacts of Darkness arc, the Genkai Tournament arc, the Beasts of Maze Castle arc, and the Rescue Yukina arc. And if I'm being honest, this is some of the best shonen material of that decade. Each arc is perfectly entertaining. That doesn't drag on, doesn't linger, and doesn't overstay its welcome. It's concise, but meaningful. And each arc manages to push the story forwards in ways that make them feel impactful. Each arc has value. Nothing is wasted. The Artifacts of Darkness arc serves as Yusuke's first mission, allowing us to understand the way spirit powers work, how he works as a fighter, and we meet demons for the first time. It also introduces 2 characters that will prove incredibly valuable to the story as we go forward: Kurama and Hiei. Kurama is a demon thief who, after a challenging ordeal, is reborn as a human child, where he recovers, and in that time, he gains sympathy for humanity, but is not without his centuries of wisdom and knowledge, and wit, most importantly, from his previous life as a demon thief. Hiei, on the other hand, is much younger. He's a demon who's undergone surgical augmentation in order to enhance his powers. He has something to prove, he has a chip on his shoulder, is utterly ruthless, and a perfect demonic rival to Yusuke, similar to how Kuwabara is a perfect human rival to Yusuke. From there we enter into the first of 3 tournaments in Yu Yu Hakusho, Genkai's tournament. Here Yusuke enters a tournament to stop a demon named Rando from learning the techniques of the cynical spiritual warrior Genkai. In this arc, we learn Kuwabara has developed spiritual skills as well, specifically that of the spirit sword to counteract Yusuke's spirit gun, making him a near even match for Yusuke in this sense. We also meet Genkai, who is one of my favorite mentors in old school anime. She's just so cynical and grumpy, I love her. But the point I really want to focus on here is the tournament structure. Each leg of the tournament, from the qualifying rounds to the individual fights along the way, are creative and interesting. Each enemy is quickly established with their own unique skill set. There's a real sense of threat from each opponent, one that's independent of necessarily just having more power or the stronger technique. While Yusuke and Kuwabara are clearly inexperienced, they win through some clever innovation and fighting. Each victory feels earned and establishes this sense, again, that anything can happen. It's not always the strongest who wins, but the one who comes out on top who wins. For example, the villain Rando is defeated not because Yusuke is stronger, has a better technique, or even better at fighting. Yusuke wins because Rando does this spell that requires the opponent to hear the words of the mantra. But during the fight, Yusuke fell in a bog and got pond scum in his ears. Stuff like that gives the series this cynical edge to it that I just love. It's not simply who's stronger, there's also the element of just unexpected chaos to these fights, which is realistic in many ways. I mean, the demon part isn't realistic, but shit happening, that's realistic. The Beasts of Maze Castle is the first arc where Yusuke's core team is established. Basically, super powerful demons emerge, Yusuke is tasked with beating them, yada yada yada, end of the world kind of things, but he ends up bringing a team with him: Kuwabara, Kurama, and Hiei. This establishes a dynamic between the 4 characters, having to work together, that becomes the core of the series moving forward, their friendship. Each one of them has a chaotic and emotional connection to the other, and it's very compelling seeing how each character bounces off one another. Each one challenges the other to grow in unique ways. Yusuke is impulsive and on the fly. Kuwabara has undying loyalty and honor. Kurama is clever and strategic, while Hiei pushes himself beyond the limitations of his body to achieve effective and spectacular means to end his problems. The four saint beasts of the arc are not necessarily great villains, but they serve as good enough obstacles for the heroes to fight. I think when it gets to Suzaku, it gets a little long in the tooth, but either way it works out. The big moment is, of course, the fight with Kuwabara and Byakko. It's the Rescue Yukina arc where the show really kicks it into high gear. Unlike Bleach, the show I would compare Yu Yu Hakusho to the most, the show doesn't over-rely on rescue arcs. Yukina is an ice apparition whose tears become valuable crystals, so she's been kidnapped by a human crime lord, the utterly repulsive Gonzo Tarukane and his Black Book Club. So Yusuke and Kuwabara need to rescue Yukina from a human threat. Not a demonic threat, but a human threat. And Kuwabara is smitten by Yukina, who we later learn is Hiei's sister. Hiei wants to remain a secret for reasons we don't know yet, but we also later learn that Hiei was cast out from the ice apparitions. It's an interesting dynamic that helps us understand Hiei while adding some dramatic irony to Kuwabara's journey. Now, while this arc does add something new, like a human villain, after all these demonic antagonists, it adds lore for Hiei, Kuwabara, and all this. In terms of fights, it seems pretty underwhelming at first, with Yusuke and Kuwabara just cleaning house with all of Tarukane's henchmen. It also doesn't help that one of the members of the Black Book Club, Sakio, seems determined to place bets in favor of Yusuke and Kuwabara. But Tarukane has one ace. The Toguro brothers, legendary demons known for being the champions, the reigning champions, in fact, of the infamous Dark Tournament. And it's with their introduction that Yu Yu Hakusho becomes, well, legend.
You wanna be crazy, you wanna go freak out, you don't wanna break down in thy rusty heart.
Elder Toguro is a shapeshifter who can become anything and is basically unkillable.
Now we're having a bit of trouble making the little bitch cry. That's where you come in.
So let me get this straight. You're paying us, out of your own pocket, to make a little girl cry.
Correct.
I f***ing love being a demon!
Younger Toguro becomes extremely buff on demand, and the fight they have with Kuwabara and Yusuke is badass, but ultimately ends with Kuwabara stabbing Toguro through with his spirit sword, seemingly. They save the day and leave, and then we learn that the Toguros are alive, and in fact, they threw the fight because they were in league with Sakio. Shock, I'm sure, and Sakio just wanted to get all the money from Tarukane, essentially. But there's something different here. Younger Toguro seems unsatisfied. He wants to challenge Yusuke again, and in order to do so, offers Yusuke an invitation to the Dark Tournament, where he and 4 other fighters will compete in a totally fair tournament without anything at all underhanded happening, where in the final round, if they make it, Yusuke and Toguro will be able to fight one another again, after Yusuke is, of course, trained by beating every other fighter to reach that point. Sure, it takes some persuasion, and by persuasion I mean blackmail, but Yusuke decides to go, taking with him his regular team, all of whom train on their own, as well as mysterious 5th fighter who, spoilers, is Genkai, because of course it is. No one's shocked by this reveal. Also, Genkai and Toguro were friends, possibly more than friends, back in the day, with Toguro becoming a demon, because he was originally a human being, as a matter of fact, after he won the Dark Tournament in the first place. So we have a whole legacy going on here. There's lore to this matchup, you see. Most people agree the Dark Tournament arc, which, by the way, is by far the longest arc in the whole series, is where Yu Yu Hakusho peaks. Each round of the tournament features a mini story in and of itself. Each of the 5 protagonists are given opportunities to explore themselves in combat. Kuwabara remains an idealist in the face of utter cruelty. He's constantly pressured to challenge his own sense of honor in order to win or in order to endure for easy solutions, but remains true to his true feelings. and while he sometimes loses, his victories always come across as stronger all the more for it. Kurama, meanwhile, is tested with his ties to humanity and demonkind, constantly finding clever but cruel ways to succeed, despite the deck always being stacked against him, always being forced to dip into his past in order to survive. At one point, he's even age-reversed to his pre-birth form, that being Yoko Kurama, an even more ruthless demon with incredible powers. Hiei pushes himself to control the uncontrollable Dragon of Darkness Flame, an all-powerful technique that feeds off your flesh when you use it. High reward, big cost. But Yusuke, he has the toughest lesson of all. His fights situate him against characters who, in many ways, are just foils for Yusuke. And all of them seem to push Yusuke to embrace both his strength as a fighter and a human being. I love the fights with Chu and Jin, especially for this reason. Ultimately, to improve, Yusuke's positive traits are weighed against his worst ones. Yusuke has to learn, essentially, from the examples of those he fights to grow himself, while demonstrating how he himself is a model for others to follow. In some ways. I love, especially again, with mentioning Jin and Chu, there's a friendliness to the battle. None of them want to kill the other, but they do want to fight to push themselves further. And you see with Jin and Chu especially, how fighting Yusuke advances their character, as well as Yusuke's. There's also the more abstract parallel to all this. See, during that early arc where Yusuke was dead, he was given an egg that would absorb his spiritual energy and manifest as a personification of Yusuke's essence, a persona, if you will. And that egg hatches, and out comes who? A very round penguin with big ears. I guess Yusuke's persona is adorable. And by accepting this inner manifestation of himself, a persona, if you will, he vastly increases his powers. He also absorbs Genkai's energy, leaving his teacher drained, and himself super powerful. And this is all just in time for Toguro to meet with Genkai, fight her outside the tournament, and kill her. Which leads to our ultimate conclusion of the arc, the final battle, where all of the characters demonstrate the lessons they've learned. It's a culmination of their arcs in spectacular fighting fashion. The ultimate culmination with Yusuke, however, is the reveal that younger Toguro is in many ways the perfect foil to Yusuke. Yusuke on some level actually admires Toguro for being the strongest, the most powerful person in the room, refusing to budge for anyone else. And we realize that Toguro is in many ways hasn't been Yusuke's nemesis, but actually a secret mentor for Yusuke, training him through example, so that he can both end Toguro's prolonged, unnatural demonic essence, as well as turn out to be a better man than Toguro ever could be. We learn that Yusuke has been deliberately sculpted into being the best person he can be, even by his enemies. And one key moment that happens during the fight with Toguro is, in order to motivate Yusuke to kill him, because Yusuke is hesitant to kill Toguro for good, he goes with Kuwabara and seemingly kills him, demonstrating how Yusuke being powerful might make you forget basic human empathy, as well as how delaying to finish a fight might result in others getting hurt. Also, it motivates Yusuke by emotionally hurting him and making him out of control. But obviously Kuwabara isn't dead, and Toguro didn't want to kill Kuwabara either. He just wanted to guide Yusuke through example to his end goal, how to stop the unstoppable through your own effort. There's something deeply powerful about the Dark Tournament arc in many ways, when you realize it's not just another shonen tournament arc, but it's one long character arc for the protagonists. All of them. Where even the adversaries on some level want to see the heroes grow for the better. On some level. Each of the members of Team Toguro exists as a perfect foil for their ultimate final target. Karasu is a cruel strategist. Bui is defined both by his immense power and his drive to kill his teammate, that being Toguro. And now Toguro is every bit as vile and dishonorable as Kuwabara is good and honorable. Perfect foils. And their prize for winning the Dark Tournament, well, they can get one wish. Toguro wished for a demonic body, for immense power, but they wished to revive Genkai. A selfless wish in the face of so many previous selfish ones. Genkai's revival isn't a deus ex machina, but a prize that is foreshadowed throughout the story. While Toguro wished selfishly for more power, Yusuke and his team used their prize for the sake of someone else. Oh, and Sakia was going to use everything to open up a portal to the demon world. That's something I'm sure won't ever happen again or be relevant later on. I'm sure not next arc at all. Oh, what's that? We're going to the next arc? Well, what could it be? Oh, Chapter Black, of course. For some people, Chapter Black is the best arc of Yu Yu Hakusho. I disagree. The Dark Tournament arc is, in my opinion, the perfect arc. Chapter Black is almost perfect. But the way it fails sets up the final arc of the series for more failure, and that is something I cannot easily look past, and also why it's so interesting to discuss. In effect, the plot of Chapter Black is very simple. Before Yusuke became Spirit Detective, there was another, Sensui. Sensui went nuts after stumbling onto one of Sakyo's torture dens, where humans tormented demons. This inverted Sensui's very black and white morality, showing that demons aren't just evil, humans are too. Sensui takes Sakyo's plan to open up a portal to Demon World with the help of his demonic lover and Elder Toguro, and is just going to open up a portal to Demon World. That's the plot. He's going to open up a portal to Demon World. He's going to brute force a hole through dimensions, and our heroes are the only ones who can stop him, as well as maybe the only ones who can help him. Also, he's granted various humans unique abilities, all of whom have lost faith in the meaning of life thanks to being forced to watch Chapter Black, a cursed videotape from Spirit World containing all of humanity's worst sins. In other words, it's demonic live leak. It's just live leak, basically. So you can watch Chapter Black at home if you don't mind that on your search history. So far, sounds good, right? Simple, direct, not complicated, kind of harkens back to the older arc in the first saga, right? And honestly, it is very good for the most part. We get to see our heroes fight not demons, but people. Broken people pushed to a nihilistic edge that Sensui has exploited in some way. Some of them are sympathetic, and our heroes don't actually want to do them any harm. But in some cases, they have to. And others, well, they're just monsters, consumed so thoroughly by their own nihilism that they can barely be regarded as human anymore at all. And that's interesting. At what point does a human become worse than a demon? Combined with all of this, the fights become less shonen action fights, like in the Dark Tournament, and more like elaborate puzzles. By this point, our heroes are immensely powerful. They just beat Toguro, the reigning champion of the Dark Tournament. So the only thing that can really challenge them are fights that exist on a non-linear progression. These are fights where power is less important than ingenuity and cleverness. Not strength-based, but skill-based. Test the characters and their problem-solving abilities more than raw power, which is why characters like Kuwabara and Kurama thrive in this arc, while others like Hiei feel out of their element. Hiei, especially for much of this arc, has very little to do. He's actually missing for most of it, which, I mean, that's a problem, because that means the core of the story, this team dynamic, has to be broken up for a prolonged period of time. I think one key fight is much later on when Kurama faces off against the Game Master, a young kid who creates elaborate games and puzzles that exist as a precursor in some ways to Yu-Gi-Oh's Death Game. The Game Master thinks he's creating what is essentially an elaborate time waster for the heroes, but Kurama recognizes this as the rules of a certain video game, and he sees a key flaw. The Game Master has created a game where if the heroes win, and they will have to win eventually, the Game Master dies. If the heroes lose, nothing happens to them, they can just replay. But eventually, they'll play again until there's one scenario where the Game Master dies. And once the game is started, it's impossible to stop it. Kurama has to end the life of a child. And this is a scene that weighs heavily on him, so much so that he decides not to kill his next opponent, which happens to be one of the puppet masters behind everything, Elder Toguro. Oh, and when I say he doesn't kill Elder Toguro, what I really mean is he hooks him up to a plant that triggers an eternal, undying nightmare where he will be forever drained of energy despite the fact he himself is unkillable and thus immortal, and so will be drained beyond the limitations of his soul for eternity, never ending a hellscape in which he can never escape. Maybe death would have been better off. Maybe it was perfect for him, who knows. But the problems with the series are all centered on Sensui. See, we are told early on that Sensui isn't just a normal enemy, he has a higher power level than Toguro. By a lot. Which is annoying. Whenever shonen shows establish power level ranking systems, it usually feels like they're telling you, oh, that last fight, all those characters you faced, they were nothing compared to this super powerful threat right here. Here's the new level of strength, and everything before that was so much smaller. Like, Toguro's a B, this guy's an S. We're skipping past A into S territory now, which, especially if soon every character becomes at A or S, then it almost makes Toguro seem pathetic by standards that make no sense. Like, he trained for 50 years and only got to B, whereas Yusuke gets like a couple years in the timeline and becomes S. It's dumb, right? It diminishes what came before in many ways. Before, powers felt very particular. Kurama's plant-based abilities felt different from Kuwabara's Spirit Sword, or Hiei's Shadow Flame powers, or Yusuke's Spirit Gun, or Genkai's Spirit Wave. They're all distinct and unique, and thus don't fall into the same traps that DBZ did with Energy Beam struggles, where everyone's power set feels the same. Chapter Black further emphasizes this nonlinear power scaling by showcasing unique abilities that render the established skills thus far kind of moot. But unlike the Dark Tournament, which builds upon everything that came before, the fight with Sensui feels completely disengaged with all the ideas and concepts set up before, being a more traditional shonen battle scene. Oh yeah, a traditional battle with multiple power-up sequences. You see, Sensui isn't just one person. He's actually 7 in the same body, because he had 7 personalities, 7 personas. And because he has 7 personas, he got to train 7 times as fast, which means he has super powerful spirit energy that's just better than everyone else's, because that makes sense. And every time Yusuke thinks, oh, I've got Sensui now, he's on the ropes, he just pulls out a new form that's even stronger than the last one, making everything that came before completely redundant. He's by far the strongest character Yusuke ever faces, and there's just no way he can prep for it. There's no sense of, oh, we've been building to this. No, it just pulls out of your ass new powers. And what sucks about this is that Sensui and Yusuke are in many ways perfect foils. Sensui has this rigid sense of morality of good and evil, while Yusuke doesn't. That's why Yusuke's able to deal with trauma that Sensui just couldn't take. It's what makes him interesting at the onset of the arc. But unlike Toguro and Yusuke, whose similarities and differences play into their fight, Sensui's don't. He feels off. His rigid morality doesn't play into any of his actions against Yusuke. Ultimately, Sensui, like Toguro, does want to perish. Despite his great power, Sensui has a terminal illness and wants to die in Demon World while punishing humanity for its egregious sins, or his perceived sins anyway. But ultimately, this means that Yusuke and the gang don't get to kill Sensui. Time does. Time and the most powerful entity in Demon World, who possesses Yusuke's body and gives him immense power, which, you know, if a literal god has to intervene in your fight twice in your story. King Enma also has special forces that break into all this, who are just also more powerful than Toguro, all of them, which begs the question, why didn't they kill Toguro? But what do I know? We're going with this, I guess. But again, what value did any of this serve? Any of their training, any of their growth? The characters didn't solve the problem. Gods did. Multiple times. In every fight before, the heroes won because of their ingenuity, wit, character growth. But here, they win because of multiple Deus Ex Machinas addressing things they couldn't have prepared for at all. Oh, also Yusuke dies. Again. And then gets better. And so does every single person who died in the arc, including the Game Master Kurama killed. Which, yeah, I'm glad he got better too, because I like the character, but doesn't that rob the previous moment of its intensity? He gets better 10 episodes after dying, basically. For a show where death is mostly permanent outside the initial start, and the wish to bring Genkai back, which again took a lot of effort, this segment makes it feel cheap. It undoes so much dramatic tension of what came before, because so many deaths are undone so quickly. The power level scaling, the Deus Ex Machinas, it ultimately breaks Yu Yu Hakusho for me in a way that just can't be put back together again. It breaks the momentum built up over the course of the whole series, and ultimately we're left feeling unfulfilled. It's not fulfilling to watch Yusuke constantly grow stronger over the course of a fight, only to see it's still not enough. It's not fulfilling to watch all of the consequences of the cast's actions be undermined in an instant, the good and the bad. It's not fulfilling to feel like God has to take the wheel to solve our problems twice. It feels dull. And I know people love the spectacle of the Sensui fight. Indeed, it's a really cool fight to put in AMVs or the like, but it doesn't hit the same way that the Toguro fight did. There isn't a humanity behind it. We are not seeing characters reach the culmination of their arcs, we're just seeing fists slam into faces. And I think a lot has to do with Togashi's own exhaustion working on Yu Yu Hakusho. In an interview contained in the official doujinshi Yoshirin Deppon, Yoshihiro Togashi answers some frequent questions about his work on Yu Yu Hakusho, as well as his mentality approaching the end of the series, which at that point was oncoming. When asked about the most painful thing that happened while making Yu Yu Hakusho, he cited two examples. The color pages for Yusuke's fight with Chu in the Dark Tournament, a highlight of that arc, if I do say so myself, and the final fight with Sensui, as in the whole thing.
The second time was around the time Yusuke was fighting Sensui, when I didn't want to draw manga anymore and I felt nauseous just sitting down to draw. I asked the editorial office if I couldn't quit Yu Yu Hakusho already, for the first time at this point.
Later on in the doujinshi, there's a little note titled "On Finishing the Serialization of Yu Yu Hakusho, Looking Back on Failure." This title should illustrate just about everything you'd know about Togashi's state of mind and health leading into the final battle that we just discussed previously.
If I'm honest, I'm feeling a great relief and pleasure at the thought that I've finally been able to finish Yu Yu Hakusho. It's not that I've lost all emotional attachment to the work, but I feel that my stress levels have greatly surpassed my will to work. The 6 months leading up to the concluding chapter felt awfully long to me. To tell the truth, it had already been decided that Yu Yu Hakusho was going to end in December 1993, or rather, this was a decision that I had forced on the editorial staff. There were many reasons for this, but in broad strokes, these were the major reasons. 1. My body. 2. Thoughts I had about what it means to draw manga. 3. Desire to do other things than work.
In effect, working on Yu Yu Hakusho caused Togashi irreparable damage to his body. As a result of this, he needed this to end. He had to get over it soon. This contributes, I think, to the final arc's incredibly short length. However, what this does not exactly forgive is the clumsy way in which the characters are used in said plot. The manga especially is criticized for being extremely rushed, something the anime remedies by expanding the Three Kings tournament out a little bit, as in it actually shows it happening. The manga is almost all off screen, but it's still not nearly enough. This is like Bleach 1000 Year Blood Wars, where the anime adaptation masterfully expands a truncated manga arc to fill in the blanks. This is an almost anime original plotline in its entirety here, and unfortunately it just doesn't do enough to wrap things up effectively. So how does this arc start? It's here we see the first of many problems with this arc. Demon World is open. I mean, it's been patched up, but it's still open. Yusuke learns he has demonic ancestry, and that his father, or like male ancestor, is Raizen, one of the 3 demon kings who reign over a portion of Demon World, the other 2 being Yomi and Makuro. Raizen has some admiration for humanity, and has refused to consume human flesh. He's on a hunger strike, essentially. Demons need human flesh to survive, though, so he's running on fumes, and has been for the last 500 years. The entirety of Demon World shakes with Raizen's hunger pains, as his belly rumbling causes tremors. That's how powerful we're talking about here. This is absurd levels of strength. It's during this arc we find out that Yusuke has some sympathy with demons who have taken this fast as well, because they're predators. They need human flesh to survive. This alienates Yusuke, though. This mentality of accepting demons' hunger from his fellow humans who, are the people who have to be eaten by the demons, so I guess it makes sense. Especially an older spirit detective who doesn't want someone who excuses human devouring around her kids. Shocking, I know. This in part drives the first portion of the arc, Yusuke's alienation from society and eventual departure to Demon World. Up until now, Yusuke has had a large cast of characters around him, supporting him and helping him out and helping him endure through rough times. But now in this arc, we see Yusuke almost entirely, artificially, pushing away his loved ones. This robs the series of one of its core appeals, the team dynamic. I know why Yusuke is doing it, but it robs the dynamic. Kuwabara especially is pushed to the fringes of the plot. Keiko, who has endured a lot with her relationship with Yusuke, she's irrelevant to the whole arc. She basically breaks up with him, kinda, but they all get back together again in the end, so who cares? It tries to have its cake and eat it by having this alienation, but it doesn't really change the ending. It still ends where it probably would end if this didn't happen in the first place. Nothing feels significantly changed the story's end. This arc sets up Yusuke removing himself from humanity, but it's only in the short term, at least in terms of how much of the show we're watching left. It's short-term drama, but doesn't have a long-lasting consequence for the ending, other than characters not being around for the Three Kings arc. That's basically it. Functionally, it exists just to isolate the cast. As a result, we're kind of left asking why they need to make Yusuke be isolated. I mean, the real reason is because we need Yusuke, Kurama, and Hiei to pair up with each of the three Demon Kings, and there's not a fourth Demon King, so Kuwabara can't be used anywhere. That's the doorless explanation for this. From a Watsonian perspective, it feels kind of random. We get to see each of the three Demon Kings from one of the heroes' perspectives, but we gotta get rid of Kuwabara, and it feels frustrating because Kuwabara is the best character, at least one of the best characters. So yeah, Yusuke goes off to Demon World to meet his father Raizen, ancestor Raizen. Father makes more sense, sounds more appropriate. While Kurama and Hiei separately go out to meet with the other two kings, Yomi and Makuro. Kurama used to work with Yomi, but they had a tense breakup when Kurama, hired an assassin to kill Yomi, and the battle resulted in Yomi going blind, but Yomi's kind of okay with Kurama now, I guess. He's kind of gotten over the fact that he lost his eyesight thanks to him. Still, he hires Kurama as his second in command in order to seize control over Demon World once Raizen dies, because when Raizen dies, he's a power vacuum, he's going to take over that third and, go from there. Kurama's arc to some extent is interesting because it explores his core character conflict this entire show. His past versus his present. How does someone with a long history of sin and cruelty contend with a violent past after you've been kind of redeemed, moved past it? In the Dark Tournament, Kurama's past was forced back onto him with the Okukurama transformation. But now Kurama's present is put into the past world. It's a bit of an inversion, so to speak. And now we see how Kurama's modern perspectives influence the world from which he came. And it's interesting to an extent. Also, Yomi makes a son named Shura to use as a perfect soldier in battle, but then given where the arc goes, the Three Kings tournament, it's like he's kind of just there, and he fights Yomi, but then doesn't really extend beyond that. It feels kind of redundant. It feels like Shura only exists to further Yomi's arc, a character we're basically introduced to in this arc. It feels kind of underwhelming, I think. There's a lot of elements to Yomi's characters introduced, but just seems kind of like a plot spiral, just furthers Yomi's arc, but doesn't further anyone else's arc around Yomi. It's very isolated and disconnected. Then there's Makuro. As for Makuro, well, she's odd. She basically is a trafficked demon, and by trafficked you know what I'm talking about, who maimed herself to make herself undesirable to anyone else who would dare touch her. Of all the three kings, her arc is the most disturbing, but also the most compelling. She also has the weakest link to Team Urameshi. She just sort of likes Hiei. I guess they kind of bond over the fact they're both forgotten, abandoned things from their society. They see themselves as kindred spirits, and that's neat, but it's not super explored, especially because Yomi soaks up so much screen time during this arc. She also exists to break up the Kurama Hiei ship, which was one of the most popular ships in this era. It was everywhere, and it feels kind of like we're straight watching Hiei. Well, I mean, like, come on, look at these two. They're clearly involved with each other in some extent. So Raizen dies of hunger, because of course he does, but not before helping Yusuke unlock his full potential with his henchmen and all that. So now Yusuke has had an unbelievable boost in power. He's now S rank, he's like one of the strongest entities in the world. He develops like the same powers Sensui does with the spirit aura, the holy aura or whatever. Everyone is now super powerful. They're like peak power level. They're beyond Toguro easily. They make Toguro look small by comparison. They get such a boost in power, it almost makes the whole rest of the series look small by comparison. They're like Sensui levels of power. It's absurd. Everyone is broken in terms of power level. And now we get all of these armies forming. We got Raizen's old fighting buddies showing up. There's multiple characters from the Dark Tournament showing back up now as like a reunion. It's kind of fun. You're getting a nostalgic feeling like, oh, all these characters we've seen, they're all coming together. You get the sense that something big is coming. And there's a power vacuum now. And his force is ready to take over all of Demon World. And Yusuke steps in and proposes a compromise. a tournament, one that can reoccur every 4 years to determine a singular king of Demon World. A fighting tournament. Yeah, that's how we're resolving this arc. And everyone agrees to these terms, I guess, because it's easier than having a big bloody war over everything. Now, unlike the Dark Tournament, which that felt foreboding and dread-inducing, this tournament feels very civil, which is ironic considering that the stakes are so high. There's the implication that while you might die in this tournament, the intention isn't to kill. There's a civility here that isn't present in past arcs, and that kind of robs this arc of tension despite the fact that the stakes are so high. It's the fate of Demon World, it's the fate of humanity. Whoever wins will determine how many demons can come into Human World and eat them. You know, it could be a massacre of humans depending on who wins, yet everyone has this kind of gentlemanly fun to it. There's an eagerness to everyone. There's an excitement. There's an optimism. Everyone's smiling. Even when they lose, they smile. There's never a sense that, yeah, if Yomi wins, he might unleash demons upon the human world to feast upon mankind. Because again, the three kings, they're divided not because of anything like just territory. It's also the philosophy of how many people you can eat. And Yomi says, hey, demons can eat whoever they want. Just have all the demons eat all the people. Who gives a shit? So if Yomi wins, humanity is fucked. And yet, there's no tension about this. No one cares if Yomi's winning. I mean, they have a mild tension, sure, but everyone's kind of like, yeah, this is gonna be fun. Let's have a fun tournament, guys. It's all broy fun. It's weird. The vibe is weird. And we learn over time, Yomi kind of admires Yusuke. Yusuke kind of admires Yomi. Makuro and Hiei are having a good time. Yomi's not mad at Kurama for blinding him. Everyone has like a nice bond to each other, and it's kind of weird. There's not that sense of tension and violence. But here's the thing too that's really strange. None of the three main characters here, Yusuke, Hiei, or Kurama, are learning anything. Rather, the arcs are focused on how our heroes inspire and change the characters surrounding them in Demon World. In theory, this isn't a bad idea, but it does feel out of kind of left field, especially because the show up until this point has shown both how the characters grow and how their growth affects others. Demons up until now have been presented as bloodthirsty, violent by nature. But while there have been several demons that subvert this expectation, you would think the leaders of this demon world would be more violent themselves, especially Yomi, who thinks demons should eat all humanity. But that's simply not the case. There's a divide here between the violence demons commit and the demons we face. And there's no one as vile as Sakyo or Tarukane, who are vastly more evil than any of the demons we've seen in the whole show so far. You might notice though at this point I'm leaving something very crucial out of this discussion from the manga. That's not present in the anime at all, but trust me, we'll get to it. It would be one thing if the heroes could change Demon World through great effort, but it seems effortless. It seems almost the moment the tournament's announced, the war that almost happened in Demon World over the fate of humanity, it feels deflated of tension. Even Kurama is welcomed back to Demon World with open arms despite his crimes. This is something Kurama's been running away from this whole show, and yet when he gets to Demon World, it's like, oh, it's fine. He has like a battle. Shachi, I think his name is. He's like Yomi's second in command over who gets to be Yomi's second in command, but it's kind of weird and useless, and it's resolved too quickly, and it just becomes prepping for the tournament basically after that. Making this all the more complicated is the core conflict between the three kings. Again, how they should eat people to survive. All three have different perspectives, yet those perspectives never come up in the tournament. It's mentioned early on to establish the threat and establish the stakes, but it's never relevant throughout. The whole that Sensui is boring between human and demon world is brought up constantly in Chapter Black. Yusuke's potential death during the Dark Tournament, that's brought up constantly in every match because death is always present. But here, the stakes are rarely brought up, and no one's afraid of dying because everyone has a friendly smile when they fight. No one wants either to really die. They even have a vibe that you're gonna go, well, see you next 4 years if you lose this time. Train and get better next time. Mass human devouring? No. It's a friendly handshake and a gentleman's fight. It feels like a betrayal of Yusuke's character so far though, because he wants to avoid seeing others harmed, but he's so fine with people who want to devour people to survive? I want to point out though, in Yusuke's first fight with a demon, he goes ballistic over watching a demon take a child's soul that he's going to devour. But mass human devouring, he's fine. It's a gentleman's battle. It's a handshake. It feels like a betrayal of Yusuke's character. He wants to avoid seeing others harmed. It makes sense to understand demons need food to survive, but why would he be so sympathetic to Yomi, a demon who wants wanton destruction? It just feels off. As such, Yomi makes for a weak big bad. His beliefs seem disconnected from his actions in the plot proper. While he does redeem himself in a sense through the tournament, that's not exactly enough. Fighting Yusuke restores his interest in life, its vibrancy, his appreciation of the value of life, but it doesn't make him reevaluate his beliefs about eating people. It feels disconnected from that. We're meant to have this sense of elation that Yusuke brought change to the world, but Yomi never actually says he's wrong for wanting to devour humanity en masse, which means he'll just always remain as a threat. 4 years from now, he could take over the tournament, and then bye-bye humanity. And it's just cool now. At all. At no point is that really addressed. If anything, Hiei's fight with Makuro feels like the only one where the character's core beliefs are challenged by the hero, by Hiei, depending on whether you're watching the anime or the manga. So, in the anime, Hiei cuts the shackles that Makuro has worn from her days of slavery, which, kind of represents her feelings of isolation, even in her own brain, from the rest of the world of shackles. But in the manga, Hiei takes Makuro's abuser, hooks him up to the same plant Elder Toguro hooked up to, and gives him as a gift to Makuro so she can torture him for all eternity. At least both of these address the core scars Makuro has, unlike with Yomi, who never does. But at least with tournament arcs, there's a great opportunity for characters who normally would never fight to fight, right? Well, we see tons of familiar faces. We see Shu, we see Jin, we see all these guys, but they never fight each other. We see them fight NPCs basically, but we never see, say, Chu or Jin rematch Yusuke. We never see Hiei and Yusuke fight. Or hell, Kurama and Yusuke fight. That'd be kind of neat, wouldn't it? We don't see the characters we've loved fight, which would have been really cool considering it's a tournament arc where all of them are competing separately. Hiei and Yusuke had a pseudo fight during Chapter Black, and that's all well and good, but it would kind of feel almost like the Majin Vegeta versus Goku fight from Dragon Ball Z, right? Seeing these two rivals face off again, demonstrating all the lessons they've gathered over time. We can see the Spirit Wave go up against the Dragon of Darkness Flame. Something epic and cool, but we don't get that. I was thinking when watching this of the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament from Dragon Ball, back in, Dragon Ball. We see the main arc is ultimately pairing up Goku and Piccolo, but we see several returning characters face off against each other, including Goku and Tien. We see Goku fight Chi-Chi, which brings back an older character we hadn't seen in a very long time, and that allows us to reinterpret the character of Chi-Chi for the new era in which she appears. The tournament needed a few fun pairings like that, but we never get that, and it's disappointing. The most interesting element of this tournament is the ending. Because Yusuke loses. Yusuke loses to Yomi, the big bad. But Yomi is so injured during the fight that he ultimately is beaten in the final round by one of Raizen's friends, a burly, good-natured demon named Enki. And Enki decides to announce that as Demon King, no demons will cause harm to human world. In effect, this ends the core conflict of Yu Yu Hakusho with a peace agreement between humanity and demonkind for the next 4 years anyway, until the next tournament happens, when Enki hopefully wins again, but who knows. But it's interesting, isn't it? It ends with harmony. It does address the core conflict that's been running throughout the series. Demons invading Earth and killing people. Yusuke protecting humanity from demons. Yusuke's tournament creates a safety net for humanity, and we learn they are demons that really don't want to hurt people, which opens a few questions, doesn't it? Like, if there's so many good demons, why did we get so many bad demons in the show so far? I mean, that's the thing that's so weird. I mean, Yusuke is trying to get a demon king to propose a solution that makes everyone happy. Even the losers, everyone's happy about this. Even Yomi seems okay with Enki winning. So, like, if there's so many demons that are just good-natured, especially the demon kings, why were there so many demons going on in humanity? What's up with that? It seems weird. It makes you kind of question, wait, what's going on here? And this is where I gotta bring something up. I've withheld a detail about the story from you so far. The anime ending did expand what happened in the manga. Yes, it did enrich what happened. It filled it out. It fleshed it out. The anime ending is superior in many ways to the manga ending, but it leaves out one key detail from the plot of the manga. One instrumental detail that changes the entire way Yu Yu Hakusho is interpreted. And without this plot component, the ending feels hollow because there's a fundamental component missing from how the anime ends. And without this component, the whole thing falls apart. And without doing it correctly, the whole conflict of the ending arc feels insufficient. And that is this, the King Enma twist. So I mentioned before I left out the manga twist, right? So in the anime, it's implied King Enma has some influence over what's happening. He apparently planned for Yusuke to die in the Sensui fight, because he concluded that would unlock Yusuke's hidden demonic power, and this would force Yusuke to go into Demon World to resolve the conflict over Demon World's occupation. In effect, his actions feel like some chess master working behind the scenes to instill order in the orderless land, to create a lasting peace. In this sense, King Enma seems like a morally gray but ultimately good person. He seems almost proud that Koenma is coming into his own as a man. But in the manga, we learn something different's going on. Turns out King Enma isn't a good man. In fact, he's been playing a far more cynical game behind the scenes. We learn that throughout the entire show, he has been kidnapping demons and brainwashing them. And then, once they're brainwashed and violent, he turns them loose on humanity to instill fear of Demon World. Rando, the Four Kings, many of the demons from the Dark Tournament, all of them were brainwashed and done to preserve power and control, to use fear to justify developing weapons to fight demons, to instill enforcers of Spirit World's will, the Spirit Detectives. In effect, he gains dominion both of Earth by using demons as weapons against humanity, and over Demon World by having the justification to attack that world and lay siege upon it and manipulate it. As a result, he is the real big bad of the whole series. And this ending really puts into perspective the larger theme throughout the series, that even though demons can cause violence, other people are worse. Of all of the arcs, there's only a couple small ones where demons are actually the big bads, just Rando and the Four Saint Beasts. The Hiei stuff is like a heist, you know, whatever. But it's always been the Black Book Club, it's been Sakyo, it's been Sensui, and they've spurred on violence throughout the series, and demons seem like a small threat. Demons seem just like ordinary people with special abilities. The Toguro brothers were once humans who turned into demons, and their actions spur on lots of stuff in the series. Even the various demons that were fought during Dark Tournament, most of them were friendly enough. Most of them weren't evil, they were just maybe on the wrong side. Some were even good people in general. There were a few evil ones, but no more than humanity. The rigid morality that Sensui clings to is based on a lie made by King Enma. Sensui sees demons as evil and humanity as good. That is a lie that King Enma forced upon him. And when that lie falls apart, Sensui snaps. The Spirit Detective exists as a tool to maintain control, to organize a corrupt organization. Yusuke is a tool of that. In effect, he's not a cop, he's not a Spirit Detective, he's border control. And it's only his flexible morality that allows him to fail at his job so wonderfully. In the Sensui arc, we find out Koenma realizes things wrong with his father, and he goes to establish a new order, one that fundamentally overturns the previous one, and as a result brings about the end of interdimensional colonialism without Yusuke. And the anime does none of this. And as a result, we are left with an uncomfortable question, because creative decisions in both iterations of the story seem almost geared for the other to benefit the narrative. They're two halves and they're missing. But even still, it opens up the real problem. Why isn't Yusuke specifically going up to King Enma and fighting him? In the manga too, King Enma's the big bad. He's the big issue. Why is that arc so disinterested with King Enma? But then again, by removing the King Enma twist in the anime version, it feels fundamentally like, I guess we have a new set of rules now. There's no fundamental upheaval that really instills a relief. There's no implication that demons aren't all that bad to begin with, and thus we just need to go over there and bring about like a peace on their own terms. Independence, self-governance. Because we have a sense of colonialism that we have to upturn, that gives that other idea of self-governance more value, of order, of peace within its own sense, within its own terms. But because we remove that, there's no guarantee of anything because demons are still violent. We still have demons who break into the human world and cause problems, just like before. There's no sense of perfect kind of harmony because we don't know that King Enma is brainwashing anyone. And King Enma is fine, he's still in charge in the anime. But that twist isn't there. He's still a chess master instilling colonial rule through military coups behind the scenes, and Yusuke is his instrument. An unknowing instrument, but an instrument all the same. So in the manga, we have fundamental crucial change to the way the world is structured, but it's unsatisfying because most of it's off screen or most of it's done by other characters outside of Yusuke. And in the anime, we get the sense that Spirit World still being a colonial force into Demon World, instilling a puppet government using puppet leaders to enact rule. based on terminology set by a complete outsider. Yusuke brings revolution to Demon World in both, yes, but in the anime, it's still on Spirit World's terms on some level. It's still part of King Enma's scheme, and as a result, we're left feeling, wow, this is not fulfilling. But more than just that, Yusuke never confronts King Enma. Koenma throws King Enma out in the manga, which you could argue ties in greater with the themes of this arc. Yusuke's influence changing others. But this feels like a background detail. Even though this is a major element of the manga, it's in the background. Just like how in the manga, Genkai dies, and it's off screen. Off page, I guess you can say. Yusuke's greatest impact in this arc is that he is the goal others can reach. An olive branch between worlds, but the changes he inspires feel disconnected from the arc Yusuke goes through. Yusuke makes a tournament, fights the tournament, and leaves. Yusuke inspires change in Kurama and Hiei, and the three of them inspire change in Demon World. On paper, that sounds brilliant, but it's not in practice. Yusuke inspires change in Koenma, and that change ripples to that Spirit World in the manga. But ultimately, it feels insufficient because we realize that this isn't a story about Yusuke acting, but those responding to Yusuke's previous actions. This is the arc where Yusuke stops doing. And when he stops doing, it's boring to watch. For a series so centered on Yusuke's actions throughout this arc, Yusuke feels disconnected from the core focus of what should be the narrative. Because up until now, it's all been from his perspective to some degree, or the core central team's perspective. And it's very disappointing. What's driving the plot? What's pushing us onward? We no longer care about the core characters because they are decentralized from their own story. Once Yusuke goes off to meet with Raizen, his arc is done. He's finished. He's already completed his journey. And all we're seeing from that point onward are the effects he has on others. And as would be tempered somewhat if Yusuke, Kurama, and Hiei, it would be better if we saw how they grew in this arc. If we saw how Yusuke grew in the tournament, how we saw Hiei grow, Kurama grow, but they feel complete. It feels like an epilogue. It reminds me a lot of the epilogue Dragon Ball Z had as well, the final arc of the Buu saga. It ends, and we get a brief little epilogue that takes place several years later. No one grows, we just see where everyone is, how they ended up, and what happens next. And we see Goku engage with one last fight against Oob, the reincarnation of the last big bad. Three Kings has a similar function, I feel, where we are basically wrapping things up with the dangling ends, seeing where everyone went, but it turns out everyone went to the same place. Everyone has the same role now, fighters in a tournament. Or in the final episode, they meet up at a beach and see Yusuke return from Demon World from training. And, Kuwabara's home the whole time, I guess. I don't know, it's underwhelming. There are a few epilogues to the manga where we see small little snippet stories that were later adapted in the OVAs. We learn Genkai dies, like I said before. We have a few episodic adventures, like how we started this series, that feel like Great Teacher Onizuka learning lessons, essentially. And we see Yusuke's experience. But I can't help but feel that it doesn't work. It doesn't work going back to the way we started with the whole Yusuke is a spirit helping people out vibe, when we've already had these massive things. We are going back to basics when we should be wrapping things up. It feels disjointed. It feels disconnected. It feels sloppy. It feels like we're spinning our wheels until the last chapter comes out. And again, that reminds me again of the Dragon Ball Z stuff, because in the epilogue to that, they go to fight the World Tournament. It's a mainstay of the series that comes right back. From its second arc in Dragon Ball, there's a World Tournament, and now we end on one. And they encounter the reincarnation of their greatest enemy, and Goku just challenges them to a friendly spar, and they go off to the future to train. We see Goku train the next generation of fighter. And that all results in a powerful ending, a capstone. The characters feel like they've moved from the beginning, but it feels like it makes sense. We circle back to show how much they've grown. But this anime doesn't do that. Yu Yu Hakusho doesn't end like that. The ending is the best episode. The last episode of this arc is the best of the Three Kings arc. It has like a really homey, character-focused vibe. They all just talk and reunite. But it reminds you that the arc up until now has lacked the human center that all the other three arcs prior have had front and center. Yusuke is isolated, and we lose track of humanity. But as a result of that, we lose the core driving force of what drives Yusuke. People changing each other, and them changing in the process. And while it's one thing that Yusuke changes the demon world and all that, it's far more impactful seeing Yusuke reunite with Keiko on that beach. It's far more impactful seeing Kuwabara talking casually about life. It's far more impactful seeing the characters be friends together. Change is meaningful if we know where they started. Change is not impactful if we're being introduced to a large world, like Demon World, seconds before it's revolutionized by newcomers. It feels effortless to go into a new place and change it. It seems easy. It's far harder for two characters who've known each other their whole lives to gradually grow in different directions, and to watch that happen in real time. Yu Yu Hakusho has never been a story about an easy solution. It's always been a series about the people that society has forgotten, the hated people, coming together to find a way to drag themselves to glory, to the best possible future, with their own blood, sweat, and tears. The big issue with the Three Kings arc, both the manga and the anime, at the core of it all, everything I've been saying is a facet of the core issue. Nothing is difficult. The lack of challenge, the easy solution, feels insincere to the core vibes of the show. And while it might be nice seeing everyone get together at the end with a big, beautiful bow, it betrays the core sense of the series. The struggle. What would fix that? Well, what if Yusuke went up and beat the shit out of King Enma over and over again? That'd be a much better ending. A final fight with the Force has been enforcing everything. Already established, we know Spirit World very well by this point, one last revolution. But again, I understand why Togashi wanted it to end. It was causing him physical pain. It's better to end, maybe unsatisfyingly, than to force a creator to push onward. It is a terrible reminder of the strain we put our manga artists through by demanding new content every week. And we've unfortunately seen some people lost to that struggle. I'm not trying to make this a big deal. It is disappointing that Yu Yu Hakusho's ending is so lame, but at the same time, I get why it's so lame. I just wish it was a little better. And I feel like as a result of this, the ending is the weakest link. It really should have ended with Sensui, I think. If you stop watching after Chapter Black, I get that. It's a perfect place to stop off on, because everything that follows feels kind of like we're spinning the wheels a little too long.